Hi, I'm Ben Kus. I'm CTO of Box, and I'm here today with Chris Child, VP of Product Management for Data Engineering at Snowflake. Chris, welcome.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me.
So let's start out. Tell us what you do at Snowflake.
Yeah, sure. So I lead the product management team for data engineering. And for us, that really means how do you get data from wherever it happens to be born into a place that you can use it? How do you then transform it into something useful? And how do you do that really in an interoperable, open, and sort of highly usable way?
And since we have sort of this interesting dynamic of evolving data in the world, when you say data, tell us what data means in your world.
Yeah, so it really means everything. We started obviously at Snowflake with structured data, things that you can put into tables and columns. But very early on, we supported semi-structured data, JSON and XML at the time and other things. But really what we're seeing is a big shift to where companies have had massive amounts of really unstructured data, documents, images, videos, the kinds of things that Box has always been very good at.
Yeah.
And those have become incredibly valuable because it's become easier to get information out of them and put it into a more structured format or even use it in those unstructured files because of all the innovations in generative AI over the last few years.
Yeah. We definitely hear this from our customers a lot when they're thinking about their data. They're thinking about all the new things that AI can do on it, especially generative AI, because as you mentioned, it's kind of was like born on unstructured data. We used to talk about how we were kind of jealous about the fact that the structured data had so many ML algorithms, so many great things to do with it. Where unstructured data was so hard to operate on. But now with generative AI, of course, you have the ability to get automation and help with your unstructured data being able to have generative AI operate on it. This has been great. Now, but when we talk to our customers about this, we often get this idea that they say all of the attention is on AI and the new models and everything that needs to be done. But they say often before they even get to the idea of being able to apply AI on it, they have a data problem they need to solve first. From your world, do you hear the same thing? And then how do you kind of interpret that like kind of request from customers?
Yeah, so we've been seeing this honestly for a long time, and it even predates they trying to activate the unstructured data. Even when people were thinking about their structured data, we would see a lot of companies that started trying to really drive kind of a transformation of their business, but they hadn't done the work to figure out how are we actually going to structure and generate the insights, and especially with AI, that part becomes harder. And then in order to really use AI, you need a solid foundation in place is the way that we think about it. And for us, that means having the data somewhere accessible. We work with a lot of companies that still have many different silos, even for their structured data. And then when you come to the unstructured data, it gets even worse. But then even once they break those silos down, unless you have really strong governance and strong security and policies around that data, it becomes very challenging and in some cases, dangerous and nerve-wracking to start running these AI algorithms when you don't actually know what data you have or what you sort of are okay to use that data for. So we absolutely agree with that. That kind of getting that foundation in place is critical to being able to move fast once you start bringing these AI techniques in place.
Yeah, I think this is something our company shares, this concept of like silos of data become like a barrier to using the data effectively. In our world, like these silos have like gone back even to like old school file systems that people have and old legacy systems that are built 30 years ago in some cases that are holding their data. And a lot of our customers are talking about like moving their data into newer systems specifically so they get AI. And in your world, what are these in your world of structured data? What are some of these silos that a lot of enterprises have?
So it's actually very similar. In a lot of cases, our customers start with a migration off of an on-premise system in a lot of cases. So they're using
old MySQL system or something.
Exactly, or a Teradata or Netezza or a variety of these systems. There were a bunch of really powerful traditional data warehouse systems that most large businesses had to try to solve this problem of I can't analyze the data in the actual systems of record in my CRM or wherever else it happens to be. So they would bring it into this big data warehouse that would sit on premise, but then those were very expensive. And so they would run out of storage and they would have to be very careful with what data is in there. And so they'd end up still with bits of data and they'd have concepts of data marts and a bunch of other things about, well, who can access what data for what purpose? But it was really more around the cost rather than governance policies. And so we often start by helping companies bring that data into the cloud and suddenly you can open up a lot more uses for it and a lot more teams that can get value out of that data. But then you find, well, now I've got 20 applications still running. Some of them are cloud applications. You might still have some on-premise applications. You've still got some MySQL databases and some Oracle databases. You may have, a bunch of other systems running. And so what we've been looking to do is how do we make it easier for people to bring all of that structured data together into one place? And then that's where, as you were sort of alluding to, generative AI has then made it even more important to say it's not just the structured data. I need the contracts. I need, all of the invoices. I need all of that data together as well so that I can actually answer these business questions in a faster, more cohesive way.
So when a customer comes to you and they say, I'm in some cases, they're thinking through their AI strategy. They know this is critical, it's disruptive technology, and they say, how can you help me with my sort of overall challenge of bringing more benefit to the organization with the new concept of generative AI agents? Like, what is sort of the way that Snowflake approaches this? Like, what is your response to that?
Yeah, so what we've seen in a lot of cases is there's a ton of really interesting models and AI capabilities and applications that are being built. But in general, you have to bring your data to those systems. And that poses a problem, especially when you're talking about highly sensitive data and PII data and things like your contracts. And there's a bunch of very important, highly sensitive data in there. So our approach has been to go the other way and help people bring those models to where the data actually sits and lives. And so this is, we talked about this a bit before with you've built this foundation now. You have really strong governance, what's in there, policies are applied, data is redacted, all of that's working very well. Now you can bring the models in, and by running them directly on the data, we can continue to apply all those rules directly to it. So examples are we have partnerships with OpenAI and Anthropic and Mistral, and we run the Llama and Gemini models, and we sort of try to be model agnostic and say we have access to any model that you need for whatever purpose you want, but we force those models to run within the governance and security boundaries that you've set up. And we can guarantee that the data never goes back, even to the model developers for training purposes or anything else. And so one of the things that's been really interesting is as we've started to build higher levels of abstraction on top of that, tools like how do I extract data out of PDFs specifically when I have a bunch that are the same. We have a capability called Cortex search that allows you to ask questions in English of a giant pool of documents and get cohesive answers. And we've paired that then with a bunch of research into how to do the same things on structured data. And you mentioned before, a lot of these generative AI models, they were built on text. They were built on unstructured data. They actually don't work all that well on structured data. And so we've actually done a lot of work around how do we make sure that these models can also speak to your structured data. We found actually one interesting thing. We have a massive trove of SQL statements that people have run in Snowflake over a long period of time. And so we fine-tuned, and then we actually trained our own foundational models based on that set of data that we have. And they were not very good. It turns out you need a better business understanding of what's going on because just the generating of the SQL doesn't actually help you. So we built a bunch of capabilities around this as well to really help people take their structured data and their unstructured data and bring them together to generate the really compelling insights.
I think what you said there is maybe like for some people who don't spend all day and night with it, they always think of like, well, AI is so smart, and then they know computers are really good at like traversing through, giant amounts of data very fast. That's just sort of built into your concept of what systems are good at. I think it's kind of interesting because people get used to the idea that like computers and database systems and just smart AI is very good about handling just large aspects of data, quickly traversing through it. But, and then some people who played with it know that like without too much work, you can kind of get the basics of convert this phrase or this question into like a query to go through the systems. But is it like that easy, or what have you guys like kind of been working through?
Yeah, so one of the things that we found is because these large language models are just that, they're trained on take a prompt or take a set of text and generate more of that text that seems fitting in a probabilistic manner. But it turns out that the way that you generally want to get deterministic answers out of structured data is it doesn't really work like that. And so what we did is we actually took our giant corpus of SQL queries that people have run in Snowflake over a long period of time, and we trained models on that. And we then asked them business questions like, how many customers do we have? What was revenue yesterday? There is somewhere in the corpus the answers to those exact queries. But the problem was because they didn't have an understanding of what those concepts meant, they were actually pretty terrible at generating the correct SQL for this. They could come up with a select statement, but it wasn't actually getting the answer to those questions. And so we went back and we looked at, and we found this actually made a lot of sense, where if you hire a new data analyst into your team, you don't bring them up to speed by giving them a printout of every single SQL query that everyone has ever run. They wouldn't actually figure it out. And so instead, what we found is what it needed was a semantic model. It needed an understanding of what are the key concepts, where are they located, how do these tables relate to each other, which is actually a lot of what you use to explain to an analyst how to use and access your data. So we started, and this comes back to the ingesting data, we've started ingesting semantic models from a bunch of different places that people had, and the caliber of the models and the results that we were getting got dramatically better. And so suddenly you could ask, how many customers do I have? What's revenue doing? And we've actually used this now to build a bunch of different agents inside Snowflake and customers are doing the same, where we have a sales agent where the salesperson can ask, hey, what exactly happened with my customer's consumption last week? And it knows, it has access to who that person's customers are. It understands that part of the model, understands what a customer is, and understands what consumption means. And it's able to answer that question actually very well by generating and running SQL ultimately. But because it has that understanding, it can then actually generate the right question to ask effectively.
I wanted to ask you about your OpenFlow system, and in particular, so one of the things that Box specializes in is this idea of extracting structured information from your unstructured data. And so we have a mechanism where we can take it and tie it to your documents, so you can see them kind of living together. And customers, when they do this and they do it at scale, one of their first questions is, but I have so much other data in my environment. What do I do with this data when I need to have it at work outside of Box? And for a long time, there's always well, let's set something up. Let's do some sort of custom integrations to pull the data back and forth. But then you came out with OpenFlow. Can you tell us about what was the set of challenges that led you to think about OpenFlow, and then how does it work, and then describe it for...
So OpenFlow is a new feature that we launched a few months ago that's powered by Apache NiFi, which is an open source product that's been out for a long time. And what NiFi allows you to do, and OpenFlow by extension, is extract data from really anywhere, do some light transformations on it, and then push it to anywhere else. And so you can see where this is valuable for Snowflake, where this allows us to connect into lots and lots of source systems, and then pull that data in a streaming fashion. But what was really interesting for us about OpenFlow wasn't just that it's a way to extract structured data, it was that it natively supported unstructured data sources as well. This means that you can connect it to Box and stream out either the files themselves or the metadata about those files so that we can use the capabilities in Box as well. But you can also connect it to a lot of other locations and a lot of other sources. And this is where we talked a little bit about those databases before. There's MySQL connectors, there's an Oracle connector that we've done in partnership with them. There's connectors to a lot of these different systems that people might have on-premise or might have in the cloud. And it allows you to then just grab just the changes, so you're not having to constantly refresh. It makes it very efficient and inexpensive in general. And then stream that data into Snowflake, so you're getting a live change log of exactly what's going on. So instead of having to go do a big refresh of, hey, send me all of my Box files again and I'll see which has changed, we're able to just grab what exactly is new since the last time we did a sync. Let's sync those over. And then we're able to pull out as well, as you mentioned, you can extract a lot of the structured data that can come along with it. And so now you can sit inside Snowflake and you say, okay, I want to actually run an analysis across, I want my customer table from my CRM, I want my revenue table, and I want all my contracts so that I can understand what terms did we sign with customers whose revenue is growing the fastest. These are the kinds of questions that in the past, you would have to go have a lawyer go relook at all of these contracts and actually figure out where do these terms sit. Now you can do that with a series of relatively simple English questions that get you, I wouldn't say always 100% of the answer, but pretty close to the correct answer on this in a tiny fraction of the time.
And it's bidirectional, correct?
It is. And so that's where I mentioned before, it was designed to pull data from anywhere and push it to anywhere. And we've kept all of that enabled. And so this can pull data into Snowflake, and then it can pull the data right back into Box so that you have the results of that so that you can activate it in your workflows that you built as well.
I had one customer who was telling me about their challenges associated with getting Salesforce, their Snowflake data, and their Box data all use the same name of a customer. And they ended up just doing what you said, which is to say, no matter what anybody said, they wanted to standardize on the name in Salesforce. And then they needed to do this mechanism to start and then to sync it all up and then have all the systems reflect that from now on. One of the things that we hear enterprises talk a lot about is this idea of an evolving set of these data platforms or these enterprise data sources in an organization. So things like their structured data store, their unstructured data store, their CRM, their HR information, and so on. Can you tell us how you see this evolving over time? Some people are predicting that all data stores move to a single one. Some people are predicting there's going to be a mass fragmentation of even more data. How do you see this world evolving from enterprises in terms of how they store their data? And then what are the kind of key reasons that you see this evolving that way?
Yeah, so I think it's super interesting. And I think there's a number of different trends that are causing a lot of shifts in the way that this world works right now. So one of the things that I think will continue to be true is you will have a set of systems of record, which are going to be where decisions are being made, events are happening, things, basically where the business interfaces with technology for the first time. So you will have a CRM-like system where your salespeople are entering, what's happening and notes and updating statuses and things along those lines. That needs some form of a transactional system behind it. You'll have product telemetry data that's flowing in and just sitting in a bus, like Kafka or somewhere. You're going to have a bunch of these different things. I don't think that's going to massively change. What will then happen is, in the past, those would get fed into whatever system you were going to be using them in, and then that system would provide you with some set of AI and analytics and other things. But that's where you'd end up with a bunch of these silos. So I'd have my product analytics stack with its own AI and its own capabilities and its own data, my CRM, which is building its own analytics and its own AI and a bunch of other pieces, and all of these would end up in these kind of rough silos. I think there's two ways that this will potentially change. One is we're seeing a big move towards a next generation of interoperable data formats, Apache Iceberg, Delta Lake, Apache Hudi. And what these are allowing is for these different systems to actually speak data in the same language in a way that they only really could do through APIs before. So with Apache Iceberg, and this is actually what powers, as an example, our connectors, our bidirectional connector with Salesforce. Salesforce stores a bunch of the data in Apache Iceberg, and then we're actually able to pull that into Snowflake without making a copy of it and start using it and running queries on it directly. So I think what we'll start to see is more of a move towards customers having a single place where they're storing all of their kind of fundamental analytics data in probably an open format where multiple systems, including Snowflake, can operate on that, transform it, query it. And that also means then that when they want to come and bring AI on top of that, the AI is not having to go run in 20 different systems. It runs in one single place. And I think AI is actually one of the big drivers that we're going to see pushing people to want to be in that system. It's not going to be cost effective, and ultimately you're not going to get great answers when you have an individual agent running in each of 20 different systems and talking with each other about what the right answer is. You need one agent to have access to all of that data. And unless you've been able to kind of pull together and centralize that, it's going to be very, very hard to do. I think we'll start to see that compress into one giant silo effectively of your data instead of a bunch of different silos. And then different systems will be able to read and write from that and operate bidirectionally on that pool of data.
That makes sense. And then they can sort of extract the structured key information centrally, even when there's distributed data that needs to belong in different places too.
Well, and take an example based on kind of what you were describing before of maybe I have all my contracts in Box. I've got my CRM data in Salesforce. And what I want to do is start to figure out, hey, which customer should I be pushing to agree to some certain terms in their next renewal or something along those lines? That's actually a really hard problem to solve today. And so when you start to centralize all this data, I can have one place where I can now write in a single query or even in a single, English language query. Yeah. Help me find all the customers who are growing at this rate, whose renewal is in the next 3 months, who don't have this term in their contract or who have signed multiple contracts over some period of time. That now becomes a single question that you can ask. And that's like a pretty simple one in the grand scheme of the types of things I can start to solve in this new world.
Yeah, definitely. Like from when we are looking through some of these types of similar use cases, some customers think that just because generative AI could understand something, that it can understand something at scale. But it turns out there's an important first step, which is to go through and basically structure the info.
Yes.
And then there's an interesting world where you not only structure it so that you can do those queries, but sometimes there's like this interesting set of questions that can't actually be answered ahead of time. So like I was talking about our customers and they had all of these leases and they said, which leases in Chicago in the last 10 years gave us the most lenient signage rights? Yeah. If you break that down, suddenly you realize, well, there's like this kind of hard filter step first. You got to go through everything. And I think they had like hundreds of thousands or even more of these kind of contracts. So you had to kind of like first structure it and then figure out which ones are Chicago in the last 10 years, like a filter step. But then the results set, you actually had to process and go through and be like, let me look through all these, because nobody extracted the signage rights. And even if you did, you'd have to compare them to be the most lenient. And so this is a whole new world of set of challenges. And interestingly, I think not a lot of people ever thought this kind of thing would be possible before. So they never even bothered to like build a system around it. But now with generative AI can clearly do many of the key steps, but then you need these systems like you're talking through about Snowflake. You need a system to not to store your contracts, to manage them. You need a system like Box to like keep track of this unstructured data so that you don't have to then copy it to many different places. The same approach that you said. And then the idea would be that like together they can kind of start to standardize the approaches to get this very useful info and these very interesting answers out of this very large amount of data that is critically important by itself, and then represent it in these different ways.
There's an interesting trend in that, I think, just in technology in general, which is it tends to take things that were possible but either very difficult or very expensive and make them a lot easier and a lot cheaper. And at first you just think, oh, like the example that you just used about finding the signage rights, it was possible to do. It was just so expensive and painful that no one was ever going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen this in a bunch of different steps. One of the things that we see with a lot of our customers when they adopt Snowflake, especially coming from these more traditional systems, in the past, they were very strict about who got access to these systems because they were expensive. And they basically, you had to go through a bunch of approvals before you could ask a question of these systems. Yeah. And then what we see is once they adopt something like Snowflake, where per question is a fraction of the cost, they start asking a lot more questions, and you realize there were a lot of really valuable questions that no one was asking that suddenly are actually going to inform and help you make better decisions at scale. And I think the examples you're giving of AI is the next evolution of this, where suddenly I can ask questions at scale that I never would have before because it was just so absurdly expensive to do so. And that's going to lead to a bunch of, maybe they actually should be tracking the signage rights and everything because that turns out to be very important. And it just never occurred to them because they hadn't asked the question before. Now they can, and it's going to change the way that they do business, which is really that last step I was talking about before. You get to now we can transform the business because these questions are significantly less expensive to ask.
I was talking to a customer on this exact topic recently, and we asked, like, what are the kinds of things that you're going to do, the efficiencies that you might get? And they brought up some of these examples, and they said, before we would have maybe hired like a team of paralegals to just go through and basically like label all this. And we're like, okay, well, like, how is that process now changing? They're like, no, we've never done that. We would never have gone through and done that. It would take too long and it's too expensive. So we just didn't ever have that data available to us. But now, combining these techniques of structured and unstructured data using different tools, like now it's possible. And then suddenly they're starting to figure out how they can do better, run their business better overall because before they would just never quite know all of this information that was available in these sort of giant like repositories of info. All right, Chris, last question. Can you tell us, looking forward, what are you most excited about from Snowflake, from AI, from the types of announcements you're talking about going forward?
Honestly, it's a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about. I'm super excited about getting more customers using OpenFlow and activating more of their data, tying that together with a lot of the AI capabilities that we're building. And really, I think we're in the very beginning of seeing how people can activate this data, how they can change the way that they operate their businesses. And I think we're in for a lot of really exciting changes over the next few years as people start to adopt these, for real and really start putting these into production and as part of their general workflows. It's going to turbocharge what a lot of employees are capable of. And I'm super excited to see kind of what our customers, what your customers, what everyone out there is able to do with this, and really how they're able to, take that leap forward.
Chris, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Ben.
And for the viewers out there, thanks for tuning in. And if you want to learn more about any of the discussions we had today, look at box.com or snowflake.com. Thank you very much.